Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 8 of Mr. Mackenzie's Social Distance Learning. The Move to Global War, German Expansion, 1933 to 38. Let's begin now. The map again? Man, even I'm getting tired of staring at this map of Europe. Well, here we are, map of Europe, 1933. This is a start of what we're talking about in today's lecture. The main focus on this map is Germany. Last episode, we really looked at the geographical terms of the Treaty of Versailles and what that did to Germany. We talked about things like the Ruhr crisis. We talked about the Saar plebiscite that's going to happen. We'll get more detail on that in this lecture. We talked about the political union with Austria, which was forbidden, Anschluss. And we'll talk about the demilitarization of the Rhineland. So we're going to see throughout this lecture that Hitler is going to go against all of these terms of the Treaty of Versailles. Everything that the Treaty of Versailles had kind of laid out that was forbidden for Germany to do, Hitler's going to go one by one against those things. So we'll be discussing that. He needs to expand Germany's border. That's really what we're talking about today, right? Germany expansion. He needs to expand his borders for more Lebensraum, more living space for the growing German population. So he needs more land for Germany. But who opposes this expansion? Okay, we're going to talk about a few nations that are going to oppose this German aggressive expansion. And the first country we're going to look at is Britain. Why? Okay, why is Britain opposed to this expansion? Well, we do know that by the early 30s, once 1929 hits, the stock market crashes. We're in the midst of the Great Depression. Great Britain is preoccupied with its own economic depression and really can't focus too much on what Germany is doing. We have to remember that the British did think the Treaty of Versailles was too harsh. So did the United States. France didn't think it was harsh enough. So the British are already taking that kind of stance that the Treaty of Versailles might have been a little bit too harsh. And they're already trying to deal with their own economic problems within their own country. And what they're really worried about is the spread of communism. Communism was probably the biggest fear post World War I to these Western democracies. Communists, or the Red Scare, was popping up in Britain as well as France and the United States as well. So, if anything, Britain might actually look to Germany as maybe even a possible ally against this growing communist threat. So moving forward through the 1920s and even into the early 30s, Britain's not so much worried about Germany as they are really worried about the Soviet Union and the spread of communism. And an intact Germany could help in this. Here we have a picture of Adolf Hitler shaking hands with the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Neville Chamberlain. Who else opposes this expansion? The French. Why? Why do the French oppose this growing expansion by Germany? We know there is a long history between the French and the Germans. Germany invaded their country twice in recent memory. 1870, Franco-Prussian War, and then they invaded again in 1914 with the start of World War I. So France does not trust Germany at all and always kind of holds them with a high sense of suspicion. Okay, so France really sees Germany as a threat. Last episode, we talked about the Ruhr crisis. The Ruhr was that rich coal mining area. Everything that was being produced there was being sent along as reparations to the French and the British. We talked about how the how the Germans missed one of those reparation payments in 1922, and then the French and the British sent the troops in. The French really get a lot of bad press over this. They get backlash for bringing in the troops, and as a result of this, the reparation amount that was put on Germany is modified, and the amount is lessened. We mentioned a while ago the idea of the little entente, the petite entente, and we can look to the map here and we can see the colored countries that belong in this small entente. We have Romania, Czechoslovakia, and Yugoslavia. And France really wants to have good relations with the little entente because it's going to help them against a growing Germany. France remembers World War I. They remember that Germany having to fight a war on two fronts was a big problem for Germany in that war. So they think if Germany rises again, having a war on two fronts is really going to benefit them again. So they want to have good relations with this little entente. But a growing, expanding Germany that might look for political union with Austria, that might look to start rearming areas in the Rhineland, that are securing borders against Poland, is going to threaten this relationship with France and the Petite Entente. Okay, so who else opposes this expansion? Well, let's talk about the United States of America. Why are they going to oppose this growing, aggressive, expansionist Germany? Well, for much of the 1920s and even the 1930s, the United States kind of retreats. They kind of retreat and become isolationists again after World War I. In terms of business and commerce, they are very much internationalists. They send out loans to nations. They have treaties with nations. But militarily, they really become isolationists again. Let Europe worry about Europe's problems. We can look at our political cartoon here done by the great Dr. Seuss. Here we have two beds. One is Europe with a bunch of little kids in it, and the other one is a nice, restful Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam saying as he sleeps, "What a lucky thing we've got separate beds." And poor old Europe, with a bunch of wide awake, what looks like youngsters in the bed here, are suffering from many kind of diseases. The Stalin itch, Hitleritis, the Blitz pox, Nazi fever, fascist fever, and then way on the floor there, the Italian mumps. So it looks like Europe is catching some colds, getting some diseases, but the United States, who's separated, is staying nice and restful and healthy. And that's really what the United States is going to enjoy for much of those interwar years between World War I and World War II. In 1933, a new president is elected. The Republican Herbert Hoover loses an election, and a new president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, is elected. This is kind of early on in the Great Depression, and with him, he's going to bring his New Deal to kind of kickstart the American economy again. FDR is going to be the longest serving American president. He actually serves about 4 terms. So he starts in 1933, but he's going to be president throughout World War II until the very end when Harry Truman has to step in. Okay, let's briefly go over, just to recap, those harsh terms of the Treaty of Versailles. That's the same map we looked at in the previous episode. We did talk about how Germany loses all of its overseas colonies. It loses Alsace-Lorraine again. That's what they took from France after the Franco-Prussian War. That goes back to France. The Rhineland has to be demilitarized. No German military there. No political union with Austria. The rich coal fields, anything that's produced in the Ruhr, in the Saar Valley, are given to the French as part of their reparations. So by 1929, Britain, France, and Belgium are going to pull their military out of the Rhineland. There was no German military in the Rhineland, but the British, French, and Belgium forces had their military stationed in the Rhineland. But when 1929 happened, which is the beginning of the Great Depression, it becomes pretty costly to keep your army stationed there overseas. So they pull them out and they bring them back home. So now it seems like the Rhineland is really kind of left defenseless in 1929. We also know that after the Ruhr crisis, reparations would be dramatically reduced, so they kind of alleviate some of the harsh payments that Germany was suffering in the 1920s. And now, even in the harsh times of the Great Depression, the amount is reduced as well. So now that it seems like these Western countries, the British, the French, the Belgians, are removing their armies from the Rhineland, what is Hitler's response to this going to be now? Well, we know this is kind of, we know what that spirit of the 1920s was, that spirit of internationalism, the countries kind of coming together, setting limits on how much tonnage of military and navies they were allowed to have. That's going to continue on into the early 30s. In the 1920s, we talked about the Washington Naval Conference. We talked about the Locarno treaties. We talked about the Kellogg-Briand Pact that's outlawing war as a means to settle disputes. In 1933, we have the Geneva Disarmament Conference, and Germany is there as well. This is the nations of the world trying to disarm. Everyone kind of bringing down the amount of men in their militaries, the amount of tonnage in their navies, the amount of production that they are allowed to do for their armies. So Hitler is here. He is part of this disarmament conference. He is the new chancellor of Germany, and we're going to see Hitler the diplomat here. Okay, he's going to be putting on a different front to the foreign delegates, that Germany wants to be a world player, that they want to be very international, that they want to disarm, and everyone, all nations should be disarming, not just Germany, but all nations. Now we know, we have hindsight. We know that Hitler has his plans. A lot of them were already outlined and mapped out in Mein Kampf. So we know what Hitler's true plans are going to be through the course of the 1930s. But by 1933, most world delegates don't know the true nature of Adolf Hitler. They don't know that his word and his signature on treaties is worthless, that he's going to kind of go behind their backs on this. But at this point, 1933, Hitler is going to play his diplomacy card and try to bring down everyone's armies, because he's not allowed to have a big army. They're only allowed to have 100,000 men, which is a drop in the bucket. So Hitler thinks everyone should be bringing down their armies. Let's look at this political cartoon. In the early 1930s, one of the biggest movies at the time was King Kong. So obviously the giant ape in captivity here is to simplify King Kong. And we can kind of see that this King Kong monster here kind of represents Germany a little bit here. We see the old German helmet on the top of him, and really kind of written on the chest of the gorilla here is armaments, that they were kind of locking it up, but sooner or later that monster is going to break free and destroy, I guess, civilization. Professor Geneva will introduce King Kong, the greatest monster in captivity. The idea is that you can try and chain up armaments to try and stop it, but sooner or later that monster is going to break free, and that's going to be Germany. They're going to break free and destroy the city. So his plan at the Geneva Disarmament Conference, he exclaims all nations should bring their army size down to the level of Germany. Germany has been forced, according to the Treaty of Versailles, to only have 100,000 men in their army. Their navy was to have no big ships, no subs. they could not have a air force. So if Germany felt if they had to be reduced to that level, all nations should be bringing down their armies to the same level of Germany. That would show true internationalist spirit if all the nations of the world are bringing down their armies. Then all nations would be equal. So this is very shrewd uh, diplomatic diplomacy that we're seeing from Adolf Hitler here. Okay, Germany has a limit on their military. If countries were truly caught up in the spirit of internationalism and disarmament, then all nations should be bringing down their armaments and being equal. So really, how does this make Hitler look on the world stage? How does this make him look? Pause the video and give me a couple of answers in your doc, and then we'll come back and I'll tell you what I think. Okay, we're back. So how does this make Hitler look on the world stage? Well, this makes him look like a pretty shrewd diplomat. If anything, this makes him look like he is really trying to disarm and bring equality to the nations of the world here. We should all be on the same playing field. If we truly have this spirit of disarmament, then they would all bring their armies down. But obviously, the French and the British are not going to agree to this at all. The French, absolutely not, because they have a lot of suspicion and mistrust against Germany. Britain, of course, is not going to agree to this because they like to have their grip on the world markets, and they're not about to see that slip through their fingers. So Hitler walks out in protest. He walks out of the Geneva Disarmament Conference in protest. This is actually going to give him kind of justification. He can take this now back to Germany and said, well, we tried diplomacy. We thought we could disarm the world, but they're not going to play fairly. Why should we? So maybe Germany should start building up its army again. So he walks out of the Geneva Conference. He's also going to leave the League of Nations. Now Hitler has justification to start a rearmament program in Germany. Now, rearmament really already began before Hitler came into power. We saw pilots being trained in Italy. We saw troops being built up in Poland and the Soviet Union. So the rearmament program was already starting to unfold before Hitler got to power. But once he gets power, and after these treaties, and they go nowhere, and the League of Nations, they leave, Hitler really starts to ramp things up. So the German-Polish Non-Aggression Pact. Okay, some of you might actually be surprised to hear that there was actually a pact between Germany and Poland of non-aggression. This was in 1934. Let's think about this. This is a good 5 years before the tanks roll into Poland, before the Blitzkrieg rolls in to Poland. They had an agreement of non-aggression, which was supposed to last for about 10 years. I think they get close to 5 years before they invade. If anything, what is the purpose of this German-Polish non-aggression pact? It is there to secure the eastern borders. Germany doesn't have to worry about kind of a war on two fronts. He doesn't have to worry about his western borders. He doesn't have to worry about his eastern borders. It gives him peace of mind. Now, how does this hurt France? Well, France is obviously a little bit worried. They've always mistrusted Germany. They were hoping that if war breaks out again, Germany would find itself on a war on two fronts. As Germany signs this non-aggression pact with Poland, it's going to make that war on two fronts a lot harder to accomplish. And it's going to disrupt relations that France has with the Petite Entente, with those other Eastern European countries, kind of cuts them off from their friends over there. So this does hurt France. Civil War in Austria. We talked earlier about the kind of civil unrest that happens within Austria in the mid 30s. In 1934, there's an assassination of the Austrian president by Austrian Nazis. So there's really political chaos engulfing Austria at this time. We know that Hitler wants Austria. Hitler wants to annex Austria. He wants that Anschluss with Austria, but it is forbidden for him to do this according to the Treaty of Versailles. And that's going to make, this even makes Mussolini nervous. We talked about this when we looked at our Italian case study, that Hitler kind of moving in on Austria, at least in 1934, makes Mussolini very nervous, and he moves his Italian troops to the northern borders. Because Austria at this time was a nice little buffer state between Germany and Italy. So ultimately, Hitler is going to back down. They're going to call his bluff, and he's going to pull back. What Hitler really needs at this point is more time. He's not ready. Germany is not ready. They do not have the manpower. They don't have the military to actually go in and take over. So his bluff is called, and they don't go in and take over and have an Anschluss with Austria. Not yet, anyway. The Saar plebiscite, we talked about the Saar plebiscite in last episode. Now they're going to have that referendum. We talked about what a plebiscite was. Basically, as stated as a term of the Treaty of Versailles, the Saar was going to be kind of given to the French to hold on for 15 years. Well, it's been 15 years now since the Treaty of Versailles, and a plebiscite or a referendum is going to be held. Do the people in the Saar Valley want to stay with the French or go back with the Germans? Now, most of these people are German descent, so you could probably guess where their vote is going to go on this plebiscite. Okay, yes, the Saar is this heavy coal area in Germany, and everything that was being produced was being sent to France here as part of those reparations. So after those 15 years, the people have a referendum, a vote, the public vote. Go with France or stay with Germany. Most of them are German, so you could probably guess where their votes lie. 90% vote to stay with Germany. Not a huge surprise. This is a huge political win for Hitler. This is a huge propaganda boost for Hitler. He can kind of look out at Germany, look out to the Saar area and say, they like me, they really like me, they've chosen Germany. This is more expansion now. This is more Lebensraum. So now he starts to turn up that rearmament program even more here. Hitler moves to rebuild his army, grows army to about 21 divisions. So now we are well over that 100,000 man mark that they were supposed to be capped at. He brings in conscription, which is going to increase the German army to 36 divisions. So now we're well over that limit of what they were supposed to have. Starts to create a German air force, the Luftwaffe. Is going to get 2,500 planes built. This brings our focus now to the Rhineland, that area on the map there that really separates France and Germany. You can kind of see it with the orange, yellowy orange with the brown diagonal lines there. That is the Rhineland. It was supposed to be demilitarized. We are now in 1936. And this is going to be one of Hitler's biggest gambles here. He makes some strong moves now. He's going to move to rearm the Rhineland. This is a big gamble, And this was a big no-no according to the Treaty of Versailles. But the French, the British, the Belgians had already pulled out their military from the Rhineland, so there is no one to really stop them from doing this. So why do the British and French do nothing? Why don't they stop this German expansion? This is a clear offense. This is a clear, a clear, bold move against the Treaty of Versailles. Why do the British and the French do nothing? Pause the video and write down a couple of answers of why you think that. Okay, so why do the British and French do nothing here in 1936? This is a big gamble. Well, ultimately, if they do something, what's their move? Are they going to declare war? What are they going to be declaring war on? They're declaring war on Germany for putting German soldiers somewhere else in Germany. That's not going to play too well to their public. We have to remember the British and the French, these are democracies, these are republics. They have people who vote these men into power, and it's going to be tough to sell to the public that we have to go to war again because Germany has moved German soldiers into another part of Germany. That's a tough sell. So they know that. Also, 1936, it's not that far off. It's not been that long since the end of World War I. People in government will have a vivid memory of what World War I felt and looked like. And the last thing they really want to do is go back to war. They don't want to go back and start things up again. World War I is fresh in their minds. So Hitler he is gambling here, and he goes to rearm the Rhineland. The French and the British had the power at this point. They could have stopped it. They could have put a hold on it, but they don't. We really see the beginning of appeasement happening here. And we're really going to look into appeasement in our next episode and more in depth when we get into World War II. But they're going to kind of give in to Hitler a little bit, the British and the French. Still in 1936, we have the Spanish Civil War. This Civil War is going to be the testing ground for World War II. This is the preface to World War II. And a lot of times when we see civil wars, we see foreign nations getting involved in the conflict. Germany, as well as Italy, and even the Soviet Union are going to get involved in this conflict. Germany supports the nationalist side, the Spanish nationalists under the leadership of Francisco Franco. And Germany, who is still in the midst of its rearmament program and still is building up its military, is going to lend the nationalists some of their navy and air force. The Italians are really going to volunteer and give their soldiers. It's going to be fairly costly to Mussolini, and really the tables turn after the Spanish Civil War, where it's Adolf Hitler who's going to be at the forefront of power in Europe, and Mussolini taking a back seat to Hitler. But at this time, it's kind of the other way around. So Hitler sends over a navy and an air force to help the Spanish nationalists. He has the Condor Legion of the Luftwaffe. They're going to target civilian centers and government areas. We see the bombing of the Spanish town of Guernica, which Picasso depicts in his huge wall mural. We'll take a look at that when we study the Spanish Civil War. And having another friend on the continent doesn't hurt either. He really wants Spain as an ally to help them out, because they're obviously against communism as well. Okay, we're going to stop the spread of communism. The Soviet Union gets involved with the Spanish Civil War, and they're going to help out with the Republican side. So with Italy and Germany helping the nationalists, yes, they get an ally in Spain, but they're also going to not allow communism a foothold in Europe and kind of keep them out. And it's after this Spanish Civil War that we really see Mussolini and Hitler being brought together. A little bromance between the two of them, if you will. And then we get that Rome-Berlin axis. And then from here on in, we refer to them as not really the Central Powers of Europe. That's more of a World War I thing, but we call them the Axis powers. An agreement to mutual interests between the two nations. After the Spanish Civil War, they've kind of solidified their friendship and their agreement in the Rome-Berlin axis. The Anti-Comintern Pact of 1937. This was a pact of three nations, and it was Japan, Italy, Germany. You can see their respective leaders in the picture there. And these were nations that were anti-Comintern, that were anti-communism, in seeing communism spread internationally. They were against seeing communism spread internationally. Anti-Comintern pact between these three nations, Japan, Italy, and Germany. So now they're going to work together to oppose communism. And they're also going to use this as a mutual defense agreement. If anyone attacks either one of them, the other nation is going to come to their aid. The Hossbach Memorandum. This occurs in November of 1937. And this is an event that was done in secrecy. This is a secret meeting held in Germany between Hitler and his top foreign policy advisors. And during this secret meeting, Hitler is basically going to outline everything he intends to do over the next few years. Kind of really lays out his 4 or 5 year plan for Germany. And some of the generals in the room feel that this is too aggressive, that this is too much, too quickly, that Germany should be kind of slowing down. But things aren't going fast enough for Adolf Hitler. So he's not going to listen to those generals, and those generals, if they're smart, better get in line. By February of 1938, Hitler proclaims himself commander of German army. He will take out any general who opposes his actions. So any of those generals who felt that he was acting too aggressively or things were moving too quickly, better change their tune and fall in line fast, or perhaps another night of the long knives might happen. Okay, that concludes today's episode. Tune in next episode. We'll talk about what the international response to this growing aggression was. So we're going to look at what the international response to the expansionism in Italy, as well as the expansionism in Germany. So we'll do both together. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.